Hi, and welcome to the Pride Road Architects podcast. I'm Lisa Rains, and each episode I'll talk to people who interest me in the world of architecture and business. So join me and fellow lions and lionesses as we explore architecture in the den. So hi everyone, welcome to Architecture in the Den with me, Lisa Rains. And today I'm joined by Jeff Echols. Is it Echols or Echols?
No, you had it right. Echols.
We were just having a chat before. We've connected a couple of times. We've never actually met or talked. So I'm actually really excited for this conversation. So in the first instance, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. My name is Jeff. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, so sort of the not quite, but almost the middle of the continental U.S. to give you a little sense of the geography. My role is the vice president of community development for Entree Architect, and that basically means that I spend my time growing communities of small firm architects,
Right.
empowering, mentoring, and trying to help small firm architects in their quest to change the world. And I do mean that literally.
Yeah.
Some people think that's a little bit of hyperbole, but I don't think it is. So my background is 30 some odd years in the profession.
So are
Went
you an
on
architect by trade and training? Or
by training, yes.
yes?
The story that I like to tell is I've got a couple of degrees in architecture, and
Yeah.
graduated, went home to Chicago. Chicago was home at that time.
Yeah.
Um, Worked for a large firm up there, and um, the economy was bad. It was early '90s, late '80s, early '90s. The
Yeah.
economy was bad. Friday was the day that people were laid off,
Mm,
um, and serendipity is a wonderful thing, right? There were people that came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and they said, "Hey, you're really good at this. Why don't you, the marketing team needs your help on this thing." They tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you're really good at this. The business development team is working on a deadline. Why don't you go help them?"
mm,
And so that opened the door.
mm,
That exposed me to this idea that, hey, there's this thing called the business of architecture.
mm.
And that's when, I was still drafting. This is pre BIM models, right? This is
Yeah.
AutoCAD days, and so still drafting and still working on projects and eventually managing projects and doing some
Yeah.
design, etc. But
What year was this? Do you remember?
so this would have been early to mid '90s,
Yeah.
so a long time ago.
Well, I did my first degree in the UK between 90 and 93. So when I came out
Okay.
of
Yep.
93 looking for my first experience, year out experience, it
Hmm.
was impossible. It
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I managed to. I remember writing 100 handwritten letters.
Hmm. Yes.
I think I got about 15 interviews because people had nothing else to do but to interview people for no
Yeah.
jobs.
Right. Right. Yeah. I was telling my students, so I'm teaching two sections of pro practice this semester, one for undergrad and one for a master's program, and
Mm,
the undergrad students will be going into their internship period in
yeah.
the spring, I guess, and it's starting in January. And so I told them, hey, it's fantastic for you because there are a lot of jobs out there. But I remember, so for those that don't remember payphones, phone booths, things like those,
Yeah.
I remember just realizing that I was going to have to go essentially door to door.
Mm,
And so I was in Chicago, in the city. It was the winter, had my big coat on and a pocket full of quarters
yeah.
to feed the payphone. And And so I would go to, maybe I had a place to go next, or maybe I was gonna need to go down the list and call somebody. But I went into the phone booth, put the quarters in,
Mm.
called a firm, and the woman that answered the phone is principal of, I'm not going to say who it was or anything. It's a well known firm, well-known person, educator, architect. She she was kind enough to have a conversation,
Mm.
right? Said, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for my first job, and I've been sending out all these resumes. Would it be okay if I just stopped in the office?" That type of conversation. And she was kind enough to entertain the conversation, but she said, "Hey, we don't have any work. In fact, we're laying people off."
Mm.
I said, "Okay." And so my follow-up question was always, "Well, do you know anyone that might have, might have some work, might have a job?" And she said, "No, I really don't. Construction has stopped." I'm standing there in Chicago, and you just see these cranes that are just standing still, and nothing going on. You don't hear the noise of construction going on. She said, "I don't know anybody uh, that's hiring." And so then my second follow-up question was always, "Well, do you have any advice, right? If you were in my shoes, do you have any advice for somebody that, is a young person right out of school, that's looking for their first job?" And there was this long pause, and I thought, well, this is going to be good, because most people, I would ask that question, first one, "No, we're not hiring. No, I don't know anybody that's hiring." And then most people with the third question is, "Just keep trying," or, "No, I'm sorry. I mean, it's just really hard," something like that. And there's this long pause. I'm thinking, this is going to be a really good answer, because she's taking a minute to think about what she's going to say. So there's this pause, and in a minute she says, "I guess the only advice I have for you," and I have essentially just graduated from school, right? She says, "My only advice is it's not too late to change your career path." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, are you this this is your advice, is give up on architecture, forget about trying to find a job, go back to school and study something else, I guess." And I mean, that was, for those of us, you and I, that came out in that time period, that's sort of being forged by fire, right? You've got to figure out how to network. We didn't call it that back then, but how to network, how to make connections, how to, we didn't think about it like this, but how to do the business development, how
Yes.
to do the
Yeah.
marketing, those handwritten notes that you're talking about. Fantastic. What if you did that today, right? As
Well,
part of your marketing.
absolutely. You do that, and I say to sort of, my mentees,
Hmm.
it's a numbers game. You've got to get out there. You've got
Yeah.
to do multiples, but you've also got to have the edge. Send something
Yeah.
through the post.
Hmm.
Everyone's sending
Yeah.
everything by email, and you just ignore the email. If I got something through the post that was beautiful, I'd look at it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways.
Mm.
There's so many ways to differentiate yourself, and some of those ways could be a handwritten note. That's very unusual today, as you said. I mean, it's an email rather than a note. It could be something beautiful through the post. It could be, I think of Pride Road Architects, and you have a very different business model, which I'm intrigued by.
Ah,
That's a differentiator, right? And it could be certainly those other things, your website, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, the question is, what are you doing to connect with other human beings in a meaningful way, right? That's what a lot of this comes down to.
sorry, dead air. Just letting the dogs out of the room. They were starting to bark.
No worries. No worries. that I understand. We have three of them, and right now they're calm and quiet. So
They were in the room, they were calm and quiet, but my husband just came home, and once the door goes, they're like, oh.
yep, that'll do it.
Yeah. Now, I seem to remember back in 93, I had, didn't have a job. The market was dead. So I studied in Leeds in the UK, and then there was a symposium, an architectural symposium in Liverpool, which isn't that far away. It's like, an hour and a half drive or 2 hours drive, which I'm sure in America would be like nothing, but over here, over in the UK, you'd be like, oh, that's so far. So there was an architectural symposium in Liverpool, and I couldn't understand why none of my classmates went to it. I was like, it's not quite on your doorstep, but it's not that far away. And
Right.
I sort of went with someone in one of the higher years, in like a year 5 or something like that, and went across to this symposium. And there were a whole bunch of architects talking, young, upcoming, practices, and you networked. And off the back of that, I met Studio 333, and they were doing a Europan competition. It was Europan 3, and then they invited me to the Netherlands to go and work on their probably just a bit of slave draftsmanship.
Reality.
Sorry?
Reality. Yeah.
Yeah. So a bit of drafting, bit of model making, for a couple of weeks. Expenses paid, but not paid. But it was really good fun, great experience. And, they actually won Europan that year. So, it was a great piece for my portfolio, my
Right.
CV. And then I went on, I think, to, what was it? I attended a summer school in Tallinn, which it's so Tallinn, Estonia. So it had just been become independent from Russia. Which rolls eyes. Trauma going on over there at the moment.
Right.
Not necessarily in Estonia, but yeah, Ukraine and all the rest of it. But yeah, so I went over and did an architectural summer school over there. And again, it's connections, it's networks, and these networks they last a lifetime. And
They do.
then you come back to the UK with a bit of that experience, and it is a differentiator when you're going into a practice.
No,
When
100%. Yeah.
yeah. So, right, we kind of got a little bit sidetracked there, but that's the nature of this podcast.
It is. It is fine.
It's just chatting. So tell me a bit about Entre Architecture or Entre Architect.
Yeah. So Entre Architect is the largest worldwide community of small firm architects.
Hmm.
Sounds there's some irony in their largest community of small, but really the mission is to support and mentor small firm architects around the world,
Hmm.
and that takes a lot of different forms at different periods of time. This is an idea that Mark R. LePage launched over 10 years ago now. It started out as a blog, and then podcast, which many of your listeners are probably familiar with. He's 400 and some, maybe 500 episodes in at this point. A Facebook group, which is healthy and thriving, and it's a community just for architects. So you can join the Entre Architect Community Facebook group, and it's a safe place for architects to have conversations about architecture. can talk about, hey, this is happening with a client. What would you do? Or this is happening with a contractor or a project, or do you have a detail, or these types of things. So it's a thriving community there on Facebook. But there's also the academy side, which is a paid side of Entree Architect, where there are resources, contracts, and different documents, system documents. There are also every month there's what we call an expert training session. So somebody will come in and maybe talk about the entrepreneur operating system, or finances or marketing, or whatever the topic of the month is. And then there are mastermind groups, and but all in all, it's a community.
Mm.
It's I mean, really a community there, to the point that people will travel to meet up with each other, similar to what we've been talking about in terms of networking. People from the Entree Architect community will travel to meet each other. Every weekday afternoon, East Coast time, 4 p.m. Eastern, I host something called Context and Clarity. It's a conversation every afternoon. We have a theme for a week, and we have different topics every day. And then Thursday afternoons, I interview somebody. So yesterday it was Ray Brown. He's got two titles. One is Chief Mentor, which is a title that I love. I think that's a fantastic title. And also the co-founder of Archibiz. He's based in Melbourne, in Australia. So we've been talking all week about the people side of your business. So how do you recruit? How do you retain employees? How do you manage? And then we talked with Ray yesterday. Tomorrow's the last Friday of the month. So, or today, I guess, is the last Friday of the month. So the last Friday of every month is our book club discussion. We also have a book club associated with this. So we'll discuss a book that we've been reading all month.
But how do you have the discussion? Is it what platform?
So, well, all 5 days of the week, it is Facebook Live
Right.
inside the Facebook group. But then Thursdays we call it our simulcast,
Mm.
and it goes out to Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch.
Okay.
And so you can, from any of those platforms, and this is one thing that I tell people all the time, is like, hey, if you know somebody that needs this conversation, yesterday, like I said, we talked to Ray about managing the people side of your business. Last week we talked to Megan Dolly about your finances. If you know somebody that that needs this conversation, right? That needs to hear from an expert in whatever the topic is, invite them. Make it easy. Send them to the Entree Architect YouTube channel,
Mhm.
and they can watch it. They can listen to it, then comment, ask questions live from any of those platforms. But we try to make it. It's not unlike this, right? It's a casual conversation about a particular subject, and then we try to bring in the questions and comments from the live audience
Mm.
as much as possible to make it as
Interactive.
engaging and
Yeah.
interactive as possible. So
And what's
that
for?
those are a lot of things that are going on.
So we're back to time zones again. So 4
Yeah,
p.m. Eastern time.
right.
So what
Which is
time?
it's probably about 9 o'clock your time,
9
PM.
p.m. UK time. Right. Okay. So what time is it with you? Are you Central time?
No, I'm in Eastern.
You're in Eastern. Ah.
Yeah. If you want to dig into time zone trivia, Indiana is an anomaly, which is where I live. It's geographically it should be Central time zone, but we're on Eastern time zone.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So,
that's exciting.
oh,
Why? Why?
so in the U.S.
Yeah.
we'll go down this path, right? It's a very broad country, right? And
Yeah.
so, like others, I forget how many time zones Russia has. It's a whole bunch, and China. Well, the
Mm.
United States has a whole handful of time zones. You got Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, etc. And at some point in time, I don't know, 1800s would be my guess.
Mm.
There was a newspaper man that owned the newspaper in Indianapolis, owned a
Mm.
newspaper in I forget which city it is, but a city in Arizona,
Yeah.
and then a newspaper in Hawaii.
Right.
And as different as the daylight savings time was adopted, this guy didn't like that. He didn't like daylight savings time. So he was able to successfully lobby to not have daylight savings time where he had his newspapers. So until a handful of years ago,
Yeah.
Indiana, Arizona, and Hawaii all had their own time zones. They
Right.
didn't, we would match up part of in Indiana, we would match up part of the year with Central and part of the year with Eastern.
Right. Okay.
Arizona still does that. Hawaii's, they're out there in the ocean, so I don't know if it's
Yeah.
that big a deal for them. But in
Yeah.
Arizona, you still it's. Are you on Pacific? Are you aligning with Pacific right now? Or are you aligning with Mountain right now?
Yeah.
So it's just it's as
Does it
it's
affect
as
where
unruly
people?
as anything.
Does it affect where people kind of settle in the States? Time zones?
I don't know how much I don't know how much thought goes into that, honestly. I do remember when Indiana switched to Eastern time zone, right? Went from quote unquote Indiana time to Eastern time zone.
Mm.
There was a lot of conversation about aligning with the Eastern time zone because there was somebody claimed there was more commerce done, with New York
Yeah.
than with the basically the whole rest of the country. And somebody else later came about and said, number one, that's not true, and number two, who cares, because everything's online. But that was an argument that was made. So
I just think time zones are fascinating because I get them wrong all,
they they are.
especially because it is. I was sort of talking. My last talk was with Michelle Hottle,
Oh, huddle, yeah, yeah.
and she's over in San Diego, so
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to. I think we set a time that was good for me, but not very good for her.
But that's hard to do. I mean, we talked to Ray yes yesterday afternoon, my time,
Yeah.
and it was Friday morning. It was early Friday morning. I forget what the difference is, but it's probably about 4 o'clock, 4 or 5 o'clock a.m. Friday morning for him. Thursday
I
afternoon for
I
us,
just
and
don't function between, sort of outside of British working hours. I get, in the evening I just have to switch off. I've
yeah,
never been one for working through the night or anything like that. I can't work late. I kind of start losing the ability to talk around sort of 7 o'clock.
that I understand. Yeah,
Yeah, so during Clubhouse, yeah, when we were in lockdown, and we were doing
hmm
all these Clubhouse groups to keep in contact. um I couldn't do anything before 8 a.m. in the morning. Again,
yeah,
it don't make any sense. I take the dogs out at 7 a.m. in the morning, and
yeah.
people try and have conversations with me. I'm like, just don't talk to me.
Yeah, yeah. We're still doing a clubhouse room. It mirrors or parallels, I guess, context and clarity in the afternoon. We do a clubhouse room at 9 a.m. Eastern, which is, for somebody like Michelle that's in San Diego, Pacific time, it's 6 a.m.
Mm,
And it always amazes me that we'll have a handful of people, and the reality is, you just have to pick a time,
yeah, yeah.
right? You've just got to draw a line in the sand, and people have to say, yeah, I'll show up, or no, that's too early to show up, or too late, or whatever, and that it
I
is what it
I
is.
think where I was running a group, constructive together at 8 a.m. UK
Yeah,
time, and I kind of purposefully chose that. It was like, let's keep this UK based, and I was still getting people dropping in from the States. I'm like, what time is it?
Yeah. Well, I but I think I think that's really what you have to do. I mean that my title is VP of Community Development for Entree Architects, so my focus is building communities,
Yeah,
right? And you have
internationally, you're.
and internationally, and yes, that um, that adds a layer of complexity
Mhm.
certainly, and it amazes me every single day. I'll kick off Context and Clarity 4 p.m. Eastern,
Mm,
which is super comfortable for anybody, or at least for me. It's comfortable for somebody in the Eastern time zone. If you're over at on the other coast in the
mm,
United States, if California or Seattle or somewhere, um, it's early afternoon.
mm.
But what always amazes me is that every day, well, not every day, but many days, we will have Barry popping in from Scotland. So it's in the evening for him. Or we'll have Audrey
I think
coming in
that's
from
how it would work.
Australia,
Yeah.
and it's morning for her. And so,
So you're
understanding,
Yeah, so 9 a.m. Eastern is what, about 2 p.m. for me. So that's probably right in the middle of my busy client.
sure,
Uh,
sure, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that would be our
Because,
clubhouse
yeah,
conversations.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I need to start winding this up because it is a relatively short podcast. But I'm just going to pitch my business to you because you're listening and you're there.
let's do it.
So, I at Pride Road, we're an architectural practice franchise, and I have 155 territories available in the UK. You need to be a UK qualified architect to join the franchise. Um, I'm looking at sort of, I am looking at international master franchise licenses. If yourself or any of your network are interested, it I have had quite a lot of interest from kind of small practices,
Hmm.
but the right person would need to be business minded because they'd need to be
Yes.
looking at the master franchise rather than just taking on, small town or a small area. So it needs to have the bigger picture in mind. So yeah, I'm just throwing it out there. If there is anyone who wants to have a proper chat with me about the finances of a franchise and sort of licensing in the States or overseas or wherever.
Let me ask you this:
Mhm.
where did you get the inspiration to develop a franchise model for your firm, if I can simplify it in that way?
Of course. I set up my business in 2010. So I couldn't. I'd lost my job. I was made redundant for the second time after being on maternity leave.
Hmm.
So set up on my own, made a bunch of mistakes, and but by 2012 had kind of nailed it. Um, Working just with homeowners, really niche down, really focused my marketing, got the website, understood Google, networking, online networking, got all the socials to work as well. And at the same time, I was involved in Women in Property, the RIBA, and I could really see there was an issue for women in architecture.
Hmm.
So there's almost parity at university now. At the time, it was a lot
Okay,
less, but there's almost parity between men and women at university. But there's a massive dropout of women at the age of 30.
sure.
So what I'd realised was that I'd developed a business model that suited working mums.
Mm-hmm.
And that there were women falling out of architecture and just leaving, having all that training and then just leaving architecture. And
Yep.
From within our franchise, you've got women stepping out, losing their confidence, trying and failing to set up their own business, working in doing charity work or working in a library, not doing architecture. And so I'd found a way to make a practice work, and I thought this is what I've got to do. I've got to get this idea out there. And then I read Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited. And another book, Nigel Botterill, who's a British entrepreneur who set up Entrepreneurs Circle. He's Googling. Or looking at it. Yeah, BOTTERILL, I think, something like that. And it was a free book that came with one of the groups that were in his network, called Botty Rules, and it was basically all about franchising. And I just thought, oh yeah, that works as a model. And then spent the next few years developing it up.
Yeah, I wondered if Michael Gerber was going to come into the conversation.
Yeah.
We had him as a guest on Context and Clarity Live.
Did you?
And there are, I think there's always, so my opinion after interviewing Michael Gerber is that, first of all, he's brilliant. He's and he's developed this idea and put it into practice, even in the publication of all of his different books. Right there,
that's because he's got a one. Yeah.
Exactly. But he's also a professional provocateur, which is it's part of his brand. It's part of his brand, and it's part of what attracts people to his work. And so when he starts talking about, well, you have to develop this business and the systems for the business, and he'll tell a story about McDonald's, right? One of the sort of the ultimate franchise models in history, and when he says that, you'll have architects that bristle against that, right? Oh my gosh, I don't want to be the McDonald's of architecture, which of course is not the point at all, right? The point is that Ray Kroc came in to these two brothers that had the hamburger stand and says, hey, we can systematize this, or systemize, whatever the real word is, and we can develop this into a business that can be repeated, which is what you're doing, right? So
absolutely. And incidentally, when I talk to potential franchisees and explain, I talk about McDonald's because it's a well-known franchise.
Exactly.
No one else can name anything else apart, maybe the odd food chain, but franchising exists in the business world just across the whole spectrum.
Yeah. So when someone buys into the Pride Road franchise, what sort of systems, how do you help them set up their franchise?
Well, we provide the website, so they would have an area within our website. So our website's really sticky. So so we don't send them off and set up their own. It's within our. And we've done a certain amount of lead generation within the UK. And they can use our portfolio. So when people set up their own business, often they don't have finished photos of projects that they want to work on in the future. But we do. We've got completed extensions with happy families in it. So,
Right.
and the more lifestyle photos, so it's geared towards our audience and our clients. Um, so they get the website, they get 10 days of training, so on sales, marketing, technicals, confidence coaching, image styling, but then kind of brush ups on kind of CPDs, on the technical side, vernacular, because we're in a niche area, so it's easy to go,
Right.
right, we need to look at basements, party wall, permitted development rights, the relevant sort of things for residential extensions in the UK. So that's the training. They get access to a CRM system, customer relationship management system, which is really sophisticated but easy to use. So, and really, really like super strict, process driven, and all the kind of legal forms are there on a click of a button with dynamic fields all filled in.
Yeah.
Our process is really systematized, so it's all geared to keep the clients flowing throughout the project. We don't like throw stuff into the ether and then wait for clients in 5 years to come back to us if they want to make a change or something. We're proactive and we follow up, and we have a way of working. We do hand-drawn concept design drawings as our first. I'm holding, for those listening, I'm holding up some tracing paper A3. So we start with hand-drawn concept design workshop that's done in front of the clients, either online or in person. That is charged. We charge for it, and we don't issue those drawings until we get paid for it. And then either that concept design goes on to form a project, or it doesn't. If it doesn't, we've been paid for our time so far, and if it does, then we've got a project going through the system. Yeah, so it's end to end, basically end to end support. You buy a license for 5 years. You also pay a franchise fee of 10% of your turnover a month, plus £150 marketing fee. But you get continual support. We meet fortnightly as a team online. We meet physically every 2 months. So it's just really collaborative. Yeah. Sorry, long answer to quick.
No, I love it. I love it. Because what you just described, right? You've got all the systems and processes, and not only do you have them, not only do you understand them and have them documented, but you also have the different tools that go along with them, and they're packaged up so that to way oversimplify, you could hand them to somebody, right?
Yeah,
and
kind of a business that, well, not really.
yeah, exactly. I think that's a great term for it. I'm sure it turns some people off, but I like that idea. It's business in a box. Here you go. Here's your architecture firm, and all of those things that you just described are things that we see people struggling with all the time.
Yeah.
We talked with Ray Brown yesterday about the people side and about the strategy that needs to go in before you hire somebody. We talked to Megan Dolly a week ago, I guess, about the numbers, the financial numbers that you're looking at and what they mean, the story they tell. And we talked to Ian Motley about three-tiered or multi-tiered proposals and pricing strategies. And what you're talking about encompasses, the way that the way that you've designed it for Pride Road. It encompasses a lot of these things that we talk about all the time. And almost everybody is missing different pieces.
Mm.
Well, I do a good job of on production, but I often don't know where the next job is coming from. I don't have anything in my pipeline, right? They're not using a CRM, they don't have a process, or I struggle with keeping up um, with deadlines or correspondence because I don't have a system. I send an email and then I wait. So I don't know if you're using Honeybook or Dubsado or what you're using, but they don't have a process for the distribution and the follow up and all of those things. And that's what we see all of the time in small firms and medium sized firms. Hopefully by the time you're a quote unquote larger firm, you've got some of these things or a lot of these things that you're talking about in place. But I think that's why I said earlier I'm intrigued by your business model, because I think in the minds of many architects this is a very unique idea.
Mm.
But but to me it's an expression of what a well designed and well run, not necessarily the franchising of it, but simply the core of it
Mm.
is an expression of what a well designed and well run firm should look like. Right, these are the pieces, and this is, if you talk to Ray Brown at Archibiz, he's going to say, hey, there are a handful of fundamental pieces that have to be in place and running in any business. And oftentimes, this is one of the reasons I like to teach pro practice these days, is because when I went to school, when a lot of people went to school, we didn't get any business training. We had professional practice,
Yeah, we
but
did.
it didn't cover the business of architecture.
Absolutely.
So
I'm going to have to draw this to a close
this
because
is fun.
I need to get over to a client meeting.
Got to have those systems in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
It's really good to meet you. So I'm going to put
it's fun to finally meet.
I'm going to put your links and bios in, all the links and stuff in the podcasty whatever stuff. Right, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop recording. Bye. Thank you for joining me, Lisa Rains, for Architecture in the Den. If you want to find out about franchising, check out our website, prideroadfranchise.co.uk. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe and leave a review. And do get in touch through your favourite platform if you'd like to be a guest.